Have you ever imagined dying and coming back with a direct message from Jesus? In today's story, you'll meet Rachel, a Jewish woman who stayed dead for 13 minutes and came back with a shocking prophecy about Israel, Trump, and the future of humanity. What she saw will challenge everything you believe. If this type of content impacts you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which city you are watching. This really helps to spread this message. My name is Rachel Menashe. I'm 36 years old and I live in Austin, Texas, with my husband, Eliav, and our 2 children. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family, where mentioning the name of Jesus was practically taboo. I graduated in political science from NYU, and today I am a cybersecurity consultant. I've always been a skeptic, not an atheist, but very rational. Until that day. It was an ordinary October morning. I was returning from a lecture on geopolitics in the Middle East when a runaway truck ran through a red light and hit my car head-on. I remember the crash, the glass shattering, and then silence, a deep silence, as if time had stopped. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the car. I was floating, far away, as if my body was just a detail. I saw the accident scene from above, the blood on the asphalt, the paramedics trying to revive me. But what caught my attention the most was the light. It didn't come from above. She enveloped me as if I were inside her, and then he appeared. Yes, Jesus. And I felt a shock, an almost childish panic. No, this can't be happening, I thought. I'm Jewish. But before I said anything, he spoke, not with words, but with something that went straight to the core of my being. I know who you are, Rachel, and that's why you were called. I felt like my heart had been opened with invisible hands. All the answers I never had, about God, about the pain of my people, about why everything, started to come, but nothing prepared me for what he showed me next. Suddenly we were above Jerusalem, but it wasn't the city I knew. It was a future, devastated version, smoke, sirens, desperate crowds, and then a quick transition, like a movie cut. I saw the same place, now pacified, with children playing where there were ruins before. This is what's coming, he said, but not in the way the world expects. And that's when he gave me the most shocking alert of my life. Israel had exchanged divine presence for human power. And then, without me asking, he said a name that made me shudder. Trump. I will use it again, Jesus said, not because he understands the divine plan, but because he is not afraid to break structures that no longer serve me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It sounded like a political religious movie script, but it was real. Jesus was serious, and he told me to tell the world. But that was just the beginning. What he revealed to me next will turn everything you believe upside down. Still in the presence of that light, I felt as if every cell of my being was being rebuilt. Jesus looked at me with a love that no human being could ever express, but there was also seriousness in his gaze. It was as if he was about to show me something that few would be able to handle. Rachel, he said, the heart of Israel has grown sick. They look for me in the wrong places, in palaces, in political promises, in speeches of strength, but they don't see me where I really am. And then, with a gentle gesture, he touched my shoulder. Instantly we were transported. We didn't walk, we were, in what appeared to be the basement of the Knesset, Israel's parliament. It was a dark room with files and screens where leaders discussed strategies and agreements. But what gave me goosebumps was the energy of the place. Cold, dense, tense. Jesus looked at me and said something that cut my soul. They consult men. They ignore the voice of heaven. They think they can preserve peace without the presence of the Prince of Peace. I saw faces of politicians I recognized, Netanyahu among them, and others I hadn't yet met. They mean well, Jesus said, but they are blinded by fear, seduced by control. They want to protect, but they forget that the true refuge is in me. Suddenly, the view changed. We were in front of Western Wall, but it wasn't the present and it was the future. I saw hundreds of Israeli soldiers kneeling, crying, but they did not pray in ancient Hebrew. They said the name of Yeshua. Some screamed, others just whispered. I saw rabbis dropping books and hugging children. I saw veiled mothers holding Bibles. I saw the impossible become reality. But how will this happen? I asked. How can a people so proud of their identity recognize someone who has always been rejected? He just said, because the veil has already begun to tear. One by one, the eyes are opening. I am appearing, in dreams, in visions, in disasters, and in miracles. The truth that has been denied for centuries will emerge from the ground where it was buried. At that moment, I felt a spiritual weight, as if an ancestral chain was being broken. I saw fragments of an ancient scroll slowly burning, with names and dogmas disintegrating in the fire. Traditions that hid from me will be purified. The scriptures that hid from me will be rewritten in the hearts of my people. And then came what was perhaps the most disturbing sight. I saw the Temple Mount breaking away, literally splitting in half. An explosion of light emerged from there, and crowds approached in astonishment. "This will be the sign," said Jesus. "When that happens, it will be the beginning of the end, and the true beginning. The pain, the glory, the urgency, it was all overwhelming. My spirit burned with a single question: is the world ready for this? But Jesus already knew my doubt. He just replied firmly, "You were called to warn. They won't believe it at first, but when they see it, they'll remember." And that's when he showed me the woman who would change everything. The light around us turned to shadow, not like evil darkness, but like the silence before a storm. I felt my spirit shrink. Something was coming. Jesus remained at my side, but his expression hardened. The warmth of love still emanated from him, but now there was also something else. Judge's authority. "Are you ready to see what is behind the veil?" he asked. I nodded hesitantly. The next moment, we were in front of an immense structure, like a temple, but without a name. The building shook with voices, shouting, chanting, applause. Inside, religious leaders of all faiths were gathered, but something was wrong. I saw golden pulpits, theatrical lights, sacred books piled up as decoration, and behind it all, a dark figure, shrouded in robes of false glory, with eyes that belonged to no human being. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Jesus responded with words that marked me forever. "This is the spirit of blindness. It hides in doctrines. It feeds on religious pride. And its greatest triumph has been to convince people that they serve God when they are really serving themselves." The shadowy figure walked through the corridors invisible to human eyes. He touched the shoulders of pastors, rabbis, imams, and I saw how the glow in his eyes turned gray when he touched them. I saw hearts hardening. I saw truths being twisted. I saw the Bible, the Quran, the Tanakh, all being used as weapons, not as bridges. This spirit hates unity. It fears the name of Jesus, but feeds on the name of God when it is used for control. My chest hurt. I saw sincere people being deceived. I saw crowds shouting Amen to words that didn't come from heaven. I saw men building empires in the name of a God they barely knew. "But why allow this?" I asked, almost in despair. Jesus replied with tears in his eyes, "Because true love never forces, it reveals, it invites. And now, the time of revelation has come." At that moment, the scenario changed. I saw these same leaders being confronted by their own dreams. I saw Jesus appearing silently to them in the early hours of the morning. I saw pages being torn up and rewritten. I saw religious leaders who had always rejected him finally asking, "What if it's true?" And then he showed me something even scarier, a fake unification plan designed to look like global peace. I saw a conference where all religious symbols were mixed into a single emblem, universal faith. I saw politicians hailing this idea as the solution to the conflict in the Middle East. But Jesus took me by the arm and said firmly, "This union is not of me. It is a disguise, a peace built on compromise, not truth. Those who have eyes to see will see it, and you must warn them." I felt intense pain, as if my soul was being ripped apart. I saw multitudes walking towards that new global religion without realizing that they were moving away from the real presence of God. But then, what is real? I asked, almost begging. Jesus responded with a voice that echoed like thunder and tenderness at the same time. Sacrificial love, truth without fear, faith that listens to the Spirit, not just traditions. And it will begin in Israel, but it will spread like holy fire throughout the nations. Then I saw something extraordinary, spiritual bonfires emerging in unlikely places, inside synagogues, mosques, dormant churches, secular universities, people having experiences like mine, Jesus appearing, hearts awakening. He looked at me once again and said, "Rachel, you have seen what many refuse to see, but now you need to see what comes from heaven. What is being prepared in the invisible will shake the visible." And that's when he took me to the place where everything will begin, the border between chaos and miracle. I felt when the atmosphere around me started to change. It was like passing through an invisible membrane, as if my spirit was being pulled into an even deeper, rawer, more urgent reality. What surrounded me was no longer just light or darkness, it was like a spiritual warfare field. I could feel it in my soul, a place where heaven and earth met and collided. I was taken to a territory that I recognized in my spirit, Israel, but not as the maps show. It was an Israel of spiritual borders, where the lines were not drawn with fences or weapons, but with prayers, broken promises, and ancient pacts dormant. I was hovering over a valley between mountains, and every stone in that place seemed to carry millennia of cry. It was then that I began to feel, not just see, an oppression in the air. It wasn't an ordinary fear. It was an ancient agony, as if the earth was tired, as if the soil was crying. I saw tanks and soldiers on one side, children and old people on the other. But it wasn't just that. Saw angels lined up along an invisible line, motionless, watching, as if awaiting an order that had not yet been given. And that's when the revelation went through me like fire. That place was not just the center of world conflict. It was the point of intersection between what God intended and what man corrupted. In the middle of this spiritual field, I saw something opening in the sky, as if the very veil between dimensions was being torn apart. It was a vision, but more real than anything I had ever experienced. A temple appeared at the top of Jerusalem, but not made with human hands. He seemed vivo. It pulsed light, as if it were woven from pure adoration. It was translucent and at the same time solid. And the most shocking thing, people of all religions entered it. Muslims taking off their shoes, Christians dropping their Bibles, Jews leaving the Western Wall and entering there, all with their eyes full of tears, not of sadness, but of surrender. The presence of God was so strong that my soul could barely resist. I felt something in me break, a pride, a resistance, even the fragments of my identity built over years. In that place, I was just a spirit before the eternal. No religious name mattered to me anymore. No theological arguments made sense. There was only a living truth, pulsing, calling, absolute love and holiness that burned without destroying. It was in this celestial temple that I realized something that took my breath away. This was not the third temple that men hope to build with stone and gold. This was the temple of invisible Lamb, which will arise before let any human project replace it. He would need neither political approval nor religious permission. He simply would appear in because it is already being built in awakened hearts. And then, like a burst of revelation, I understood. Everything I had seen before, the misguided leaders, the false ecumenism, the wars, the desert woman, Trump being used without understanding, it was all scenario for the greatest turning point in the spiritual history of humanity. Israel is at the center, not because of power or territory, but because it was sealed from the beginning as the stage for the end and the beginning. And the battle, I saw clearly, was not for land, but for true. At that moment, my spirit was lifted higher. I was about to see what comes after the global spiritual rupture. When I was elevated to this new place, everything changed in intensity. The sensation was like crossing a threshold where time itself dissolves. There was no more yesterday or tomorrow. I felt the now eternal. My spirit seemed to expand as if it could understand truths that, in life, I would never have been able to bear. Before me, planet Earth, but not as we see it on maps or satellites. It was like a spiritual version of the world. The nations were enveloped in layers of energy. Some vibrated with light. Others were shrouded in dark, heavy fog. The continents seemed to pulse, as if they were alive, each carrying a unique spiritual signature. And then came the most impactful moment of this stage. The planet started to shake, but not physically. It was a tremor that shook the invisible world. The structures of lies, the foundations of ideologies, the fortresses of pride, they started to crack. I saw governments crumbling internally, religions going into crisis, ideological movements collapsing from within. What shocked me is that many of these falls were silent. They didn't come with bombs, but with something much more powerful, awakening of conscience. People in positions of spiritual power began to fall. I saw pastors, rabbis, imams, who previously had crowds at their feet, being exposed not only by scandals, but by empty of purpose. It was as if his own followers woke up and said, this is no longer enough. But at the same time, I saw lights start to come on all over the globe. Small at first, shy, common houses, simple rooms, people nobody knows. And in these houses, I saw people praying, crying out with words that did not come from doctrines but from broken hearts. This is what Jesus had shown me before. The new temple was growing, not in Jerusalem of stone, but in the homes of the broken. I saw secret revivals emerging in unlikely places, among ultra-Orthodox Jews in Tel Aviv, in favelas in Brazil, among university students in Berlin, in Muslim villages in North Africa, in hidden basements in China. And that's when I noticed the contrast. As systems fell, the invisible kingdom grew. No media, no strategy, no human leader. Only the Spirit was moving freely, like wind among ruins. I felt something explode in my being, an intercessory cry, a deep lament, but also an incandescent hope. It was as if my soul was connected to all these unknown people, awakening at the same time, as if our hearts beat in the same rhythm. We were watching, we were understanding, and then my spirit was taken back to Israel. But now I saw everything with different eyes. What would rise there, it would not be a Jewish kingdom, nor a Christian kingdom, nor a political kingdom. He would be the visible beginning of an eternal kingdom, without flag, without party, without formal religion, a kingdom that would come as a shock, but for those with a clean heart, it would come as home. That was the moment I understood. The world was entering an irreversible spiritual rupture, and I was being called to tell, to testify, to warn, and there was still more. Jesus would reveal to me the prophetic role of children, and the birth of a generation that would see the impossible. The transition was sudden, as if a curtain had been drawn amidst the chaos. The landscape changed, and suddenly, I was in a golden field, strewn with flowers that seemed to vibrate with silent music. The air there had a different density. It was like breathing the truth for the first time. Everything pulsed with life, but not just any life, new life. And that's when I saw them. Children, hundreds, maybe thousands, of all colors, cultures, creeds. Some spoke languages I've never heard before, but their eyes were the same, full of light and supernatural insight. They were gathered together, as if they had been drawn by something that adults could not understand. No leaders, no teachers, but there was order, an order that came not from without, but from within. My heart started to pound. I knew I was about to understand something sacred. The children looked at me, not with curiosity, but with familiarity, as if they already knew who I was, and without saying a word, they started showing me their hands. In each palm, there was a light symbol, like living writing. I couldn't read, but I understood. They carried spiritual codes, keys to doors that we adults lock with tradition, fear, and control. And then the revelation came to me. Jesus didn't need to speak. I knew. These children were not ordinary. They were generations reserved for the end time. Many of them had not even been born into the physical world yet. Others were already alive, growing up in simple homes, without knowing that their destiny was carry the fire of the last awakening. I saw a girl in Gaza praying hidden with a torn book of Psalms. I saw a boy in Tehran having dreams about a man in white robes calling his name. I saw a kid in New York interrupt class to say, Jesus told me that there will be light in Jerusalem after the pain, and none of them were over 12 years old. I felt such a deep reverence for that generation that I fell to my knees, even in spirit. It was like being in front of a new creation, beings born of the Spirit, not of the flesh. And most poignantly, they were not interested in debates, politics, theology. They just wanted pure God, no filters, no disputes. They were directly connected to heaven, as if they had come from there with the mission already imprinted in their blood. Jesus revealed to me at that moment that this generation would face fierce resistance. They would be silenced, labeled as strangers, even persecuted, but they wouldn't give up, because their souls were anchored in a place the world doesn't know. And then I saw something that gave me goosebumps. A group of children climbing the steps of the Temple Mount in silence, each with a flame above their heads, as if Pentecost was beginning all over again, but this time in Jerusalem. They were not coming to rebuild a physical temple. They came light the altar of the Spirit, where the fire would never go out again. It was there that I understood. The greatest spiritual revolution in history would come through the smallest. Not by pastors, not presidents, not rabbis, but for children the world underestimated. And Jesus still had more to show. The next view would be the final seal, the moment the whole world would stop to watch. The transition was sudden, as if a curtain had been drawn amidst the chaos. The landscape changed, and suddenly I was in a golden field, strewn with flowers that seemed to vibrate with silent music. The air there had a different density. It was like breathing the truth for the first time. Everything pulsed with life, but not just any life, new life. And that's when I saw them. Children, hundreds, maybe thousands, of all colors, cultures, creeds. Some spoke languages I've never heard before, but their eyes were the same, full of light and supernatural insight. They were gathered together, as if they had been drawn by something that adults could not understand. No leaders, no teachers, but there was order, an order that came not from without, but from within. My heart started to pound. I knew I was about to understand something sacred. The children looked at me, not with curiosity but with familiarity, as if they already knew who I was. And without saying a word, they started showing me their hands. In each palm, there was a light symbol, like living writing. I couldn't read, but I understood. They carried spiritual codes, keys to doors that we adults lock with tradition, fear, and control. And then the revelation came to me. Jesus didn't need to speak. I knew. These children were not ordinary. They were generations reserved for the end time. Many of them had not even been born into the physical world yet. Others were already alive, growing up in simple homes, without knowing that their destiny was carry the fire of the last awakening. I saw a girl in Gaza praying hidden with a torn book of Psalms. I saw a boy in Tehran having dreams about a man in white robes calling his name. I saw a kid in New York interrupt class to say, "Jesus told me that there will be light in Jerusalem after the pain," and none of them were over 12 years old. I felt such a deep reverence for that generation that I fell to my knees, even in spirit. It was like being in front of a new creation, beings born of the Spirit, not of the flesh. And most poignantly, they were not interested in debates, politics, theology. They just wanted pure God. No filters, no disputes. They were directly connected to heaven, as if they had come from there with the mission already imprinted in their blood. Jesus revealed to me at that moment that this generation would face fierce resistance. They would be silenced, labeled as strangers, even persecuted, but they wouldn't give up, because their souls were anchored in a place the world doesn't know. And then I saw something that gave me goosebumps. A group of children climbing the steps of the Temple Mount in silence, each with a flame above their heads, as if Pentecost was beginning all over again. But this time in Jerusalem. They were not coming to rebuild a physical temple. They came light the altar of the Spirit, where the fire would never go out again. It was there that I understood. The greatest spiritual revolution in history would come through the smallest. Not by pastors, not presidents, not rabbis, but for children the world underestimated. And Jesus still had more to show. The next view would be the final seal, the moment the whole world would stop to watch. Do you want me to continue with topic 8? You said, ChatGPT said, 8. The day the world stopped. The next vision came like soundless thunder. The children's field disappeared, and everything around was plunged into a kind of cosmic silence. It was as if the entire creation held its breath. I felt like I was being taken to the highest point, the culmination of everything that had been revealed. There was an urgency in the air. Something was about to happen. Suddenly I was above the earth, watching the planet rotate in silence. But something stood out. Israel. A different glow enveloped the nation, as if an invisible expectation hovered over it. And then, it happened. On the Temple Mount, a flash of light appeared out of nowhere. But it wasn't a physical explosion. It was as if heaven opened over Jerusalem. I didn't see angels descending or thunder rumbling. I saw one golden column of fire, transparent, alive, that extended from the heavens to the earth, exactly over that place that has divided religions for centuries. And then, like waves rising from an epicenter, the whole world reacted. I saw crowds gathered in front of the screens, newspapers stopping their schedules, Imams, pastors, rabbis in shock, people crying without knowing why. It was as if something sacred, indisputable, irrefutable had just happened. Words weren't enough. There were no explanations. And in that fire, something began to form. Not a human figure, but a presence. Everyone knew. It was him. Jesus did not appear as in films or paintings. Its shape was pure conscious light, and all and without exception, recognized his spiritual identity, even without seeing it in physical form. It was as if each soul said, "It's him. It's always been him." The earth stopped. Literally. Digital systems failed for minutes. Clocks froze. Time seemed to disintegrate in that instant. Eternity touched time, and nothing made sense anymore. And then, the three greatest symbols of the Abrahamic religions began to crumble, not by destruction, but by transcendence. I saw the Star of David, the cross, and the crescent dismantling into particles of light. And from these particles was born a single symbol, a floating, pulsating flame, like a living heart. I heard the nations falling silent. No one dared to speak. No one dared deny it. The entire earth, for a brief, eternal instant, remembered God. And I, in the center of this vision, trembled. My spirit burned like fire, not out of fear, but out of absolute conviction. This was the fulfillment of promises that no one quite understood. It was the beginning of something that theology could never explain. The rupture between heaven and earth would not come through wars or political treaties. It would come by revelation, and even in the face of such glory, there was still a part left. Jesus would make me see the end, the fate of those who would accept and doubt and those who would resist. The glory of what I saw at that moment seemed to want to tear me apart inside. It was impossible, even for my spirit, to contain the magnitude of that moment. But Jesus allowed me to continue, not to exalt myself, but to understand and then testify. As the sacred fire pulsed over Jerusalem and the nations fell into reverent silence, something began to divide. Like water separating from oil, humanity reacted in two extremes. I saw those who accepted, not out of intellectual conviction, but out of a spiritual commotion so profound that their knees buckled before they even realized it. They were Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, atheists, people of all faiths, broken before the living presence of Jesus. Some cried out of regret, others out of relief, as if they had finally found what they had always been looking for, even without knowing it. I saw synagogues where the name of Yeshua was pronounced with fear and trembling. I saw mosques where the name of Isa, Jesus, was finally understood as more than a prophet. I saw abandoned churches come back to life, not with doctrine, but with presence. And the most beautiful, no one was trying to convince anyone. It was the Spirit of God himself, like an invisible wave, touching silent hearts. But there was also those who resisted. These were not unbelievers in the ordinary sense. Many were religious leaders, intellectuals, rulers. They saw the same light, but they couldn't stand what she exposed. Their empires of control, their doctrines protected for centuries, their seats of power, everything crumbled before the living truth. And then I saw organized resistance, movements being formed against this revelation. I saw campaigns called Defense of Faith, which were actually against God himself. I saw strange religious alliances, uniting leaders who once hated each other, now trying to extinguish what Jesus had ignited. But it was too late. Light had touched the world, and nothing could undo it. I saw persecutions. I saw martyrs. I saw children expelled from schools for saying they dreamed of Jesus. I saw soldiers trying to stop cults that no longer had a name. But even in repression, the flame grew. Every attempt to erase fire seed, and I understood, with pain, true love always divides before uniting. Jesus did not come to impose, he came to reveal. And each soul, when exposed to the light, had to choose, not between religion A or B, but between pride or surrender. And I saw that this choice was not collective. It was individual, one by one. Every heart, faced with the truth, deciding who would be your Lord. So I was taken one last time, to see what would happen after this great separation, closing the cycle, the point where everything meets, the final restoration. I was taken to a place beyond any dimension I could understand. There, time did not flow like a straight line, but like a perfect circle, closing in on itself. I felt as if I were at the end of an eternal book, not the end as destruction, but the closing of a cosmic cycle. It was as if all the beginnings, pains, hopes, and promises found their point of convergence. The earth was still before me, but now, purified, not by war, nor by visible judgment, but for an internal transformation, silent, powerful. I saw entire nations awaken, not perfect, but awakened. I saw simple, living temples made of people, not stone. Places where the Spirit hovered without restriction, where everyone could enter and leave without fear, where no one owned God, and God was all in all. Israel, the same land marked by conflict from the beginning, now shone, not with technology, not with armies, not with supremacy, but with redemption. It was as if the collective guilt, the broken pacts, the tragedies of the past, everything had been absorbed by that sacred presence. The wounds were still there, but now healed with light. And then I saw the third temple, but it was not what the prophecies tried to build with human hands. There were no walls. There were no divisions. The temple was transparent, alive, pulsating, like a heart beating in the center of Jerusalem. I saw converted Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, atheists, all holding hands, kneeling on the floor. Nobody preached. All loved it. Each language sang a different melody, but everything merged into a harmony that echoed throughout the universe. This was the true end of times, not an apocalyptic end, but the end of time as we know it. Entry into what Jesus had called the kingdom. A kingdom without a temple because he was the temple itself. A kingdom without sun because he was the light itself. I saw the faces of those who had awakened, leaders who gave up their titles, theologians who burned their treatises, religious people who gave up their dogmas. They did not consider themselves wiser. They considered themselves forgiven, and that was all. And the children? Oh, the children. They were now leading. His eyes still glowed with that same gentle, steady, eternal fire. They were the guardians of the new age, not with authority over others, but with purity that guided the entire world back to the heart of God. I felt like everything inside me had been fulfilled. My spirit was full. I knew that was the end of the vision, the final moment of my out-of-body experience. I didn't come back with answers to debates. I came back with a burning certainty. Jesus is coming, not like war, not as religion, but like an awakening fire. And he showed me all this, so that I could tell it, so that you would know, because what's coming, no one is ready, but everyone is being called. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.